Good afternoon and welcome on John's seminar. Today our speaker is Dr. Ben Barrowes. Ben Barrowes received his PhD from MIT. He is a recipient of numerous awards and just recent ones. He was named Innovator of the Year for the Army of the Army's Corps of Engineering in 2019. Currently, he is an electrical engineer at CRREL, and he's adjunct professor at Thayer School of Engineering as well. He has published more than 150 journal and conference papers. His research interests are quite wide range, and particular is in electromagnetics. He's part of our electromagnetic sensing groups here at Thayer School. He contributes on the hardware development as well as modeling and other parts. And then he used those technology, particularly electromagnetic induction, for finding UXOs, unexploded ordinances, improvised explosive devices. And then his recent research interest came for the novel fusion energy generation and then intersection between modern technology and political science. With that, floor is yours, Ben.
So like Friedan said, my name is Ben Barrowes. I've been adjunct here, I think, maybe since, I was trying to remember, 2008 or something. Dartmouth and CRREL have had a long partnership, a good productive partnership. There's several people at CRREL I know have been adjunct here. There's been many joint projects. Friedan and I have had many joint projects. It's worked well for us. So it's something to pursue. We're two research institutions right next to each other. There's a lot to be gained by interaction. So, as Friedan said, I have many things I'm interested in. Generally, over the career, it's been electromagnetics, and again, worked with Friedan's group, finding unexploded bombs in the ground and other things like you heard about last week. But one thing I'll mention, and then I'll go into this. I am recently branching out into other fields, and this is one of the I think main advantages that graduate students with graduate degrees bring to the table when you get a job or wherever you go, is that you can do that. You can branch out. You can learn a new field. You can three things. You can learn what anyone else in the world knows about a certain subject. You can understand it, generally, especially if it's close to what you've studied before. And you can take the next step and publish on that. So those three things you can do with a graduate degree. So I've had some fun recently. I still do E&M, but electromagnetics, but I've also started looking into low-energy nuclear reactions, cold fusion, like Friedan mentioned, and that's a whole other subject in and of itself. But I was able to also pursue one of my interests and look at things related to technology and politics, and that's what this is about. Not about politics that much, except for that was the seed for this idea. Okay, so now we'll go into this. So often I think new areas of investigation, new interests start with a question, something that irritates you and you want answered, you want to figure it out, something that's putting a fire under you. That's how I've seen the open source software movement flourish, is that they have a piece of software they want, but it doesn't do this, and it irritates them. So they figure it out and they contribute, everyone benefits. So here, the question, the kind of thing I was thinking about a couple years ago, I suppose now, is how can we secure digital information better? Specifically, can we find a way to use technology to vote more securely? Kind of a simple, hopefully, an idea, but how exactly are we going to implement that? And I will get to that way at the end of this, how I think that this could potentially help. But that's what sparked this investigation. All right, so quick outline. I'm not gonna use slides because I'm sick of slides, and I'm just gonna talk and use the board a little bit. But I'm gonna talk about information and forgery. I'm gonna talk about communication through time. I'm gonna talk about an idea called the information bank. And then I'm gonna talk a little bit about applications and tie it back to hopefully how we could vote with this, for example. Okay, so information theory. So back in 1948, Claude Shannon, who you probably heard of, information theory, the Shannon information theory and so forth, made a concise statement about information. He said, information is the resolution of uncertainty. And I kind of like that simple way to think about it. If you don't know something, if it's uncertain, you need information, you can make it certain. And but we've always struggled with that as a society, as humans, in our cultures. As soon as we could talk to each other, there were liars, right? How do you trust that information that you got? Hearsay and third hand, and people are, they want their own benefit more than yours, so they might deceive you to get ahead or whatever. So as soon as we could talk, as soon as we could write, there were forgers and there were liars. And it's always been hard to trust information in physical form. Those are both physical forms. Speech is an acoustic thing. It vibrates a few molecules on the way to you. And writing, of course, then we could put it down and keep it for a little bit longer time. But it's always been hard to trust physical information. And a lot of our culture is trying to verify physical information, contracts and signatures. And my wife's from Japan, so they use stamps that look called a hanko. They look at individual chisel gouge marks to determine whether you did that signature or not. But it's hard. It's hard to trust the physical information. So and now we've gotten into a digital era, right? The physical information was voice, writing. There was the manuscript era starting around 3500 BC, they think, with the clay tablets, down in Mesopotamia. They had seals. They had these cylindrical seals. That's from me. There were forgeries that came along just right along with that. There have been signet rings, coinage. Everything's been forged. It's just too tempting for some people. Also a physical format, photographs came around the mid-19th century. Also forgeries. The famous forgery near and dear to my heart of Nikola Tesla sitting in front of his spark Tesla coil. And it's a double exposure. If he was really sitting there when it was on, he would have gotten electrocuted. But he didn't tell people that. And so it looks really cool of him sitting in front of all these sparks, if you know that forgery. Many other forgeries. So it's always been hard. Now we're in the digital era, okay? Our information is not physical like that often, okay? We take a picture with our smartphone, or we record something. This information is digital, okay? It's somewhere in the end. It depends on spin states of some molecules, but, we can't look at that. So it's digital. It ends up as ones and zeros. It's digital information. Of course, there's forgeries, right? We have problems with photographs being photoshopped, right? When you see an article online, how do you know who wrote that? How do you know if the references, if the data is all legitimate? How do you know that? It's hard to know. Do we have time to really vet all that? Oh, it's hard to know. And then of course there are video forgeries. You've seen the famous one I remember in this is the Barack Obama deep fake, where Peele, the comedian, his voice is becoming Obama's voice and saying things that Obama wouldn't say and so forth. But you'd never know. By looking at it, our eyes, we can't tell. So it's a forgery. So how are we gonna figure this out? Okay, our digital era is looking just the Wild West as the physical era of information. You could hope it could be better, and that's what I want to talk about today. Is we're in this digital era, information, and a lot of it, is digital. Can we find a way to trust it even better than the physical information? That's what I want to talk about. Okay. So a little bit of a digression. I want to talk about communication throughout history. This is communication efficiency, and this is a log scale, and these are 5 orders of magnitude. These are my estimations, okay? It's kind of fun for me to put this together. But information, what is it? Well, it doesn't do much good unless you communicate it. You can have information, but most of the utility of information is in the communication. It's in the transfer. So communication, if we normalize speech to 1, and this is small writing, but this is 10 to the 0, okay? If you normalize speech to 1, and what do I mean by efficiency? Well, how long does it last? How far does it go? How many people does it reach? That sort of thing. Speech doesn't last very long. Only a few people heard it when you're talking with them back in Athens, or maybe the amphitheater, right? So only a few people. Let's normalize that to 1. But then writing comes along, and all of a sudden, you're much better than that, like 7 orders of magnitude better, because that writing can now travel distances and last for a long time. We still have some of the writing from Mesopotamia. I'm going to skip several eras and go all the way. Well, this line here is Gutenberg. Okay, Gutenberg here, 1450 or so, comes up with the printing press, and we get even better efficiency on writing, on printing. And there's the penny news in London in the 1700s. For a penny, you get that day's news, and it's new information. Still goes 20 miles outside of London. Reached many people, getting very efficient. But then, a big change then happens with Maxwell, James Clerk Maxwell. I like to put a dividing line on that. He came up with electromagnetic theory that allowed us to now figure out why those telegraph lines weren't behaving, or how we can launch things through the air. Tesla comes along and does that, not Marconi, Tesla. And how we can understand that information, how we can use it, and why it bounces around so much, all this stuff. So Maxwell comes along, and we get things like, television and radio. There could be more dots here, but we went up because now, Lincoln was sitting in the telegraph room most of the Civil War, wanting dispatches from 1,000 miles away in a few seconds. It was incredible for the time. And this efficiency has just gone way up. Finally, now with the internet here, the IP stack, Berners-Lee, I estimate that we're here at about 25 orders of magnitude beyond speech. We can communicate great. One person can communicate with any number of people that wants to hear them, basically instantly. It's amazing. Not just speech. You can videos, pictures, anything. So we can communicate amazingly well compared to the physical media era. Now we're in the digital media era. So we have a lot to say. We have a lot to communicate. And this is non-survival oriented hours per day. So in terms of surviving, sleeping and eating and so forth, our non-survival oriented hours per day, this is 1, and this is about 8 or 10 is my estimate. We kind of went like that. Okay, we had 1 or 2 for most of recorded history, and then we have like 8 to 10 now, where we have time, we have something to say, or we can't, and we can say it, and we have time to say it. So we're in this era of, we can communicate, we have time and means to communicate, but right now, can we trust that information? And that's it's a hard part. the trusting of that digital information is tough. Okay. All right. So I want to approach this problem by building on things that we are familiar with. And the specific thing I want to bridge here is with a money bank and what I'm calling an information bank. Okay, money bank, information bank. If you think about a money bank, what you do is you have your money there, obviously. It used to be where, like in It's a Wonderful Life, or your physical money often lived in that bank for many hundreds of years. Nowadays, most of us don't touch our money, right? It's just a number on the screen, essentially. It's a digital thing there in the bank. So that's become digital as well. But it costs about 2 to 3% of the U.S. economy to maintain the integrity of our financial system. Even though we don't touch that money, you're sure that that's the right number. 2 to 3% of our economy is dedicated to that, right? To prevent identity theft and someone hacking into that bank or whatever. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of money. But by and large, it kind of works. We trust it. But bank accounts are for one person, okay? They authenticate that you are a real person. They look and say, what's your address? All kinds of information about you. They give you a bank account. That's part of their maintaining the integrity of the system. Yeah. And so the money bank, they authenticate the user. You usually don't touch that money. And what is the bank? What is the bank? Well, it holds dollars, right? And a dollar is a fungible thing. $1 here is $1 in the other bank. They're fungible. They're the same. They mean the same things. They can do the same things everywhere you have a dollar. And that's a critical thing, and that kind of makes our financial system work. But how does it work? Well, it works as a ledger, right? It works as a distributed ledger. Every bank has their pluses and minuses, including your account, everyone else's account, and the bank has to make sure all that matches. That some debit to you is a credit somewhere else, and it's a distributed ledger. Everybody agrees on this ledger. And when they don't, a crime has been committed generally, or you're, I don't know, every single backup you have has failed or something like that. But that's the idea. It's a distributed ledger. Everyone has to agree of the ins and outs all over the system, distributed ledger. Now, the information bank is a bit different. Let's see. Maybe I will raise this a bit. I think that's still on screen. Oh, that's so low. But an information bank. Info bank. The idea with an information bank is that it relies on a ledger as well. Okay, it relies on a blockchain ledger. And I picture this as many information banks, and not all the same people own them. I don't know if they'll be free or not. I was discussing this with some friends. Yeah, maybe they'll be free, maybe not, I'm not sure. But this is the idea stage at this point. But more than one, not the government. Oh, that's another thing about a money bank, right? It's not the government. It might be insured by the government in some ways, but the government is not in charge of a money bank. They're not going to be in charge of an info bank. Okay, so the information bank then also authenticates you. Okay, authenticates. I'm writing that one down because this is the first of 3 A's I want to try to hammer home today. They authenticate you. And that means, just like they do that both at the instantiation of your account, okay, where do you live, or the whole kind of same procedure as a money bank. this is you, this is, one person has one account, that type of thing. I guess they could have multiple accounts. But they authenticate you. And hopefully they'll do that better than today, okay? Now we have one-factor, two-factor, kind of, we're trying to authenticate, but it's not very good, in my opinion. It could be a lot better. Hopefully we'll go with biomarkers, things that can know your, back of your eye better, you from everyone else on the planet, in 1 second, stuff like that would authenticate you. So they authenticate you when you open your account, and every time you make a piece of information that you want to deposit into the information bank, it further authenticates you, okay? Like if I take a picture on phone and I want to have that picture go into the information bank, it would authenticate me right there, the eye or whatever I'm doing or whatever biomarker. That piece of information goes into the bank. So that's the idea. I make a piece of information. It's a digital piece of information. It's authenticated. It goes into the bank. Now, at that point, information is quite different from money, right? Money is fungible, as we said, dollar here, dollar there. Information is not fungible. That's why we have things like these non-fungible tokens, if you've heard of these things. The original one picture, doesn't have to be original, but they're selling one picture. It's a digital file, but that's what they're calling the one. They sell it for however much money people are willing to buy it for. And it's non-fungible, okay? Because that picture is not the same as any other picture. And your piece of information is non-fungible. So it doesn't make sense to say, well, I'll just exchange this picture for that picture and everyone will be happy. It doesn't work that way. Every picture or piece of digital information is different. So it's non-fungible. I think we can utilize that to make us more secure than the money bank, okay? So here in the information bank, I do a lot of acronyms to write, so I don't have to write so much on the board, but every piece of digital information you make, let's say you take the cryptographic hash from that piece of information. Cryptographic hash is an algorithm you put that file or whatever through, and it spits out a certain length of bytes that is unique to your piece of information. And if you change your piece of information, the cryptographic hash, and the cryptographic hash does not change, you know that there's a one-to-one correspondence there. If one changes, the other has to change, and if it doesn't, it's a forgery, okay? So this cryptographic hash, 256, there's different ones, different lengths, different ways to do it, but cryptographic hash goes on to the information bank's blockchain, okay? Information bank maintains its own blockchain for 1,000, 10,000 users with accounts, let's say. And on this blockchain, you have these cryptographic hashes, and it enters the blockchain so that at that point, they are immutable, okay? You can't change them on the blockchain because then everyone's information would be corrupted, and you'd know that, just like Bitcoin, right? There hasn't been a successful attack against Bitcoin in its many years of existence. So the bank would maintain this, and there's thousands of banks around America, or anywhere in the world, but America, say, and they reconcile their ledgers just like money banks periodically. Every day, every few hours, I don't know. And so the ledger is maintains its integrity, okay? Okay, so why do that? I do have to mention that. Hold on a second. And transfers, you can also transfer things. Just like a money bank, you can transfer money in and out and so forth, and the ledger has to match. But when you transfer in or out of a money bank or an information bank, that transaction goes onto the ledger as well. It still maintains a unique piece of information, but the one that reaches the other person is a new unique piece of information. Your original is still here, but you've allowed them to view it, for example, or put it in their bank. That's fine, but it's a different piece of information, okay? So Custody of information is maintained in this way because it's on the blockchain. And so you can transfer things in and out. Now, one critical thing here is that in a money bank, I'm not going to write about a money bank. In a money bank, you're usually anonymous, okay? You're usually anonymous in a money bank. The government or Freedom, my friend, can't know what I've done with my money, generally. They can't go in and look at my account. And so in that way, okay, it's fairly anonymous. Okay, the other side knows I did something with this money, but not with the rest of my money, and so forth. In an information bank, if you transfer something to someone, well, they kind of know it was from you, but otherwise, you can remain anonymous. Whoops. Okay, it's just so low. Anonymous. You can remain anonymous because your information bank does not need to tell the world who owns that information. The information bank can say that we, the information bank, know it's from a verified user. And we can maybe even tell you that they live in this country and, you know, some basic things about demographics, whatever the user wants to let be known to the world. But that information bank does not need to tell the world who exactly you are. They can keep that. You can remain anonymous, and yet your information can go out, okay? So you remember the George Floyd, someone videoed the George Floyd event, or, you know, that thing. I don't know how to describe it, but they videoed it, and then they posted it, but everyone knows it was their video, right? So they got press, they got people coming to their door, they got death threats, they got all kinds of stuff because everyone knew that was their information. But in an info bank, in an information bank, that person could have posted that video or put it in their information bank, can't change after they do that, okay, because it has that hash. And then they could have said to their bank, you can let everyone that wants to see this video, but don't tell them who I am. And so everyone else who sees that video would know it's an authenticated user, that that video was taken by someone who just scanned their, you know, the back of their eye, but everyone else in the world doesn't know who took it. Okay, so that would be a benefit of this information bank to you, is that you can remain anonymous but still trust the information, okay, and others can trust that information. Now, one critical thing about both a money bank, which is kind of in my imagination over here, and an information bank is that you still have to be able to somehow let people, under certain circumstances, come in and look at your information, like who you are. And that is if there's a crime, for example, or a suspected crime, if there's a search warrant. It's a search warrant. People can come in and look at your money bank account, and then they can say, okay, we determine you either did or didn't do this crime. But you're held accountable for your money and what you do with it. And if you try to forge money, and if you try to, do something illegal with your money, you're held accountable. Oh, by the way, this is the second A. That's right. You're held accountable for what you do with your money in a money bank. We also need to be held accountable for what we do with our information in an information bank. And I realize I should perhaps stop for a question or two here before I go on very much. Is there any? I was going to stop for questions before, but I just kind of got into it. Anything, or just go on? Maybe, oh, yeah.
I have a question. So with the info bank, like you example of the video, like you verify the video wasn't tampered with after it was posted, but how do you know it wasn't like forged when it entered the info bank?
Okay, that's what I was about to talk about, but yes, I held on for questions. You probably picked up on that.
It's a good question because
Yeah, the question was that how do you know that the information isn't a lie in the first place? Essentially, yep. And that's the exact thing I'm about to say. Before I do that, are there any other questions, maybe? Oh, yeah.
So my question is that for information, like for physical money banks, we have like some bodies like information banks or cascade of details like this things. What is your thought on the storage of these information? Because it can explode. So, and which is kind of a problem with all the social media also, that the chances of this getting exploding storage of what is that.
So the storage question, so the question I'm going to repeat is how can an information bank store that much information, and is that going to be a problem, essentially? It's a good question. I'm not sure the information bank needs to have your data. It might only need to have the hash, which is a lot less than your data. Then I'm not sure it would store all your data, but I bet that might happen too. But for now, it just has the hash, which is not that much data. But that's an open question. Is that it? I thought there was, okay. Yeah.
So what do you think is the objective reference for an info bank to like authenticated? And I only ask this question because, at the end of the day, people will believe what they want to believe, right? Like, I don't know, people believing that vaccines are like fake, they have microchips in them. Mm-hmm. They will believe what they want to believe. Mm-hmm. The information is just out there. So, what is, you can't like tell the info bank, and the info bank at the end of the day wants to like cater to consumers. And consumers have like a multitude of like opinions. So what is, the objective standard to which you'll hold the info bank off or not?
So this is also a good question. The information bank does not have the job, and this is kind of what you're saying and kind of not, but the information bank does not have the job of just, Well, I'm going to alter it a bit. So it's the question was, what standards do you hold the information bank to for the information in it? Yes. That kind of good? Okay. I don't, in what I'm thinking, the information bank is not the gatekeeper. They're not trying to determine truth or not truth. That's not their job. And I'm going to go into that graphic here in a minute, but that, for me, that is not what they're supposed to do. They only accept, they authenticate you, like I said, and they authenticate that you just made that information, but they don't have a role, I don't think, in whether it's true or not. And I'll get to why and so forth in a second, but yes?
So just to follow up to that, then how is this, different from any social media in some ways?
Right.
Because if the person wanted to post a video, they could have made an anonymous, account.
Mm-hmm.
Still posted the video.
Yes. Yep.
Number two, like authentication, all these social media, platforms these days sort of do some sort of like monitoring. You call it authentication or not, it's arguable, but fake news is like a big thing across social media platforms. So what is specifically different about the information bank that is not captured in the idea of a traditional social network?
Right. So that's where the third A comes in. Okay? I got to repeat that. How does the authentication better, and why won't people just spoil the system just like they do everything else, right? Essentially, right. That's a good question. And this goes to my third A, which I don't know, I'll just put here, I guess, which is accountability. Accountability. Okay, that's the third A. So storage we addressed. I was about to get to, what was your question?
Validating data when it comes in.
Validate, yeah, when it comes in. That's kind of related. Okay, yes. And then why won't people just spoil the system and find loopholes anyway? Okay, so these are good questions. This is what I was struggling with the voting too, right? Let's say you vote. How do you know people are going to believe what you voted? How do you maintain a proper record of that? Why isn't it, you know, what if they claim later they lied? Or I don't know, that wasn't their vote they wanted. And why don't people game this just like they game everything else? So that's good. So one thing I do want to say, so I don't think that the information bank can or should say that we believe this information is true or not. Okay, that's one thing I want to make clear. I don't think that's their job. I think that is still the job of authorities, eventually. But think about this, that if a user, others, okay, anyone, if you see any piece of digital information and it hasn't come from an information bank, everyone should consider that a fake from birth, okay, that information. That's how it needs to be adopted in all senses. So if you see a video and it has not gone through an information bank, you can assume that it's a deep fake, that it's not a real video, and you don't consider it as valid in a court or anything. Okay, so that's one thing. But if someone has tried to lie in their information, well, what can happen? Okay, that's where we need to get accountability. And part of the accountability is, let's say someone puts out a photograph that has a crime in it, right? They took a picture of the wrong person, or they claimed something in the photograph and they altered it, and it's a fake, and it slanders somebody's reputation. It's a crime, okay? But they put it right in their information bank, okay? But let's say it's about some person. That person can then say, that is a fake picture. That is not a true picture. And they, just like with physical media, can then go through the court law process to investigate whether that was a crime or not. They can sue that person, right? And the information bank, even though at the beginning it's anonymous, it also can be pierced by a court order, just like a money bank. If you've done something illegal with your money, you can be sued, or that information, and the court can issue a search warrant, an order, and they get your money information. Just like that, the information bank can be made to give up who exactly you are and your address, and the police come for you. Okay? So but in general they don't, unless you want them to. If you want your information publicly known, that's great. You tell your information bank that on that picture. But if you don't, you're still authenticated, so people know it came through an information bank, so they can trust the information, but you are still anonymous. So you're accountable in this sense of a court order. You can still get a search warrant against your information if others are willing to go through the process of saying that that's a crime. Okay, so that's one way, yeah.
How good is the technology come up with, in other words, it seems to me that somebody's always hacking into the system, and
Yeah.
somebody else is always figuring out how to keep that hacking, and the new technology.
Yeah.
So how do you guarantee that you can keep people from coming into change?
Well, one thing, kind of ideally, and I haven't, admittedly, I'm not going to solve that here, and I haven't solved that yet, but it's a good question.
It's been around a long time, that's why I know what to do.
Yeah. Well, biomarkers is one kind of nice thing that is pretty hard to forge, the back of your eye. But the other thing is, consider, what if the U.S. economy put 2 to 3% of the U.S. economy into maintaining information banks? Could we do it? That's trillions of dollars. Or is it in a single year? I'm not sure. Was it $20 trillion GDP or something like that? So $500 billion a year. Would that allow us to maintain the integrity of the system? Well, we might be getting there. That's what we do with money. So maybe it will need some resources. Maybe it'll need better technology. It's a good question. It's a valid question, but we stay ahead of the curve with money generally. So, and I think this is easier to maintain the integrity than a money system because of the non-fungibility. So, valid question, but I'll leave that to others to try to address. All right, so one way that we get accountable is through someone thinking that you have lied or committed a crime with your information, and they come at you with a court order, the lawsuit. Yeah.
So I still want to get the distinction between, okay, why couldn't a traditional, social network, just the only difference that I see is the anonymity bit. I mean, a social network typically knows who you are, et cetera. You can be held accountable, based on what you put up out there at a later period. The only question here is anonymity. So if any one of those players puts in a feature where you can't put verified information on an anonymous basis online, why can it just not take this role on? That's the first part. Second part, there's already a lot of mistrust with people, in these kind of platforms. So do you think they'll actually buy into this idea further, saying, hey, we'll trust the system when there's already so much mistrust?
Yeah, I will. So there's two parts to this question. How is it that much better than a social network giving someone anonymity and people could still exploit? And then why would people do this and trust it? Okay. These are also good questions. So there's other things about this that make it better than simply Facebook not giving out your name. Because everybody's information here in this information bank is on the blockchain, you can't alter your information, and the information bank can't alter your information. That's not the same as social media. They can alter your information, and you might, later. And that's one reason why it's hard to trust any of our information is we don't know the chain, we don't know who altered it, we don't know where it came from, we don't know any of that. But because no one can alter your information, here, once it's entered the blockchain, everyone else looking at that information has a certain level of trust that says, okay, that information, if necessary, we can trace back to the source, and we know it hasn't been altered since birth, and it's more secure, I think, than just simply posting on a social media site. So I think there's some advantages here compared to someone simply saying, well, just trust us, we're gonna take care of your information on Facebook. See, no one can alter your information in this case. And so, whenever your information gets out, it's trustworthy from birth, not unknown from birth. And there's a final piece. Let me get to a final big piece here about the accountability. I think I've done. So about the accountability, I'm gonna obscure that second board for a second. So this is kind of how I envision this information bank. This is an information bank working. There's you, person A, Alice or Amber or somebody. You have been authenticated. Okay, that's the first A, remember. You've been authenticated, and your information can get to others even though you are anonymous. Okay? This information could be anything we were talking about. Sometimes I just refer to them as works or information, picture, video, anything. That's a bad K, isn't it? Oh. It can get out, okay? It can get out, and people can trust that it came from a verified user, maybe your slight demographics, the whole thing. And I'll do a couple of examples if there's time in a minute. But that information gets out to others. Now, another critical thing about how we can try to have accountability is that others, okay, can feedback and say things about your information and have it be attached and immutable about your information. And why is that important? The way that's important, this is accountability. This right here, where people's opinions or, their ratings, or this could be any number of things, this information can attach to the original piece and get back to the originator. So, for example, a couple of examples there's lots of examples and it's hard to pick some, but let's say that person A here writes an article exposing some sort of thing at a company or in the government, corruption. Let's say for the sake of this example that's a true statement, okay? They write the article, they figured it out somehow, and they write it. If they weren't anonymous, that might be a problem. People might come for them, especially, in whatever country they might live in, I don't know. But they write the article. Now, others see this article about corruption in the company or government, and they say, well, verified user wrote it. Maybe we'll try to verify it. Not the information bank is not verifying it. Others might work at the same company or might have seen the same thing or whatever. Any one of them can make pieces of information that attach back to the original. So other people that work at the company might say, you know what, I think that's right. I saw that too. That was a crime. They're anonymous too, okay? Everyone's anonymous to each other if they want to be. So this little rating, sometimes I think of it as a rating, like Amazon product ratings, whatever. Those can be spoofed, right? But this could not be spoofed. This would be attached to a person and attached to a prior piece of information and go on the blockchain, so it's immutable. So this rating comes back to the article. And that article will get a reputation, okay? The article will get a reputation that the people who read it, that are familiar with it, that think that's a pretty accurate article, whatever rating they want. Okay, Amazon has their ratings, and Barnes & Noble, all these places have ratings. They can be spoofed. But it's actually good information for users to have other people's ratings, right? And this happens in lots of fields, like people are just willing to rate and work, like open source software, like I mentioned. Wikipedia has thousands and thousands of contributors just because they want to. People rate products. People, or answer questions on Stack Exchange. They like that. They like participating and communicating. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't quite work. But there's spoofing and other things. But if you are accountable for your information, that is a final piece. That's my 3 A's that will make people think, if I write this article, and yes, I can envision ways where people can game the system. It does kind of trust that many people will want to do the right thing. It does. Just like our society is resting on the exact same principle. This will rest on the principle that by and large, people want to do the right thing. Because remember, if someone says a falsehood in this rating about this article, this becomes a new piece of information, right? This rating. There's one piece, now there's another piece. And people can rate this. So if someone lies and says, oh, no, that didn't happen at that company. Didn't happen, never happened, that person never even worked there. That's a new piece of information. And that, if it's a lie, can be got back to their reputation. So the idea here is to be responsible for the information you make and for others to be able to trust it from birth that it was from a person, and that people's opinions can come back to you and make you accountable for the information you produce. So, for example, voting, okay? Voting's not going to have any information maybe come back to you, but you could anonymously vote, have it go onto the blockchain, which is immutable, so those votes could be counted theoretically forever until the blockchain's broken. I don't know. Let's just say it's not. But those could be counted by anybody. Those votes would be counted and they would not change. But people wouldn't know it's you, right? That was a big thing for the first 100 years or so in America, is that people would stand there when they know it's you. They wouldn't let you vote because they don't like you or something. And then they watch over your shoulder, and if you don't vote for who they want, that's why we have the blind ballots and so forth. And I'm out of time. So a vote could be anonymous, and yet others could see it. During a vote, the government would say to your bank, information bank, how many votes are for this person? The bank can tell them that without revealing your identity. And that would be on the blockchain, and that could not be changed. Okay? So that information would stay there, immutable, forever, until there's some larger problem. And that's how you could vote this way. Okay? And you could always go back and look, that is my vote. And I know it's there, know that's my vote, because otherwise the blockchain would have crashed or become corrupted. So you could vote this way, you can produce information this way, and you can be held accountable for your information, both by the law and by other people's opinions of your information. This would solve things like deepfakes, spoofing, phishing, misinformation, if you want to think of it that way, because let's say you read an article about microchips in the vaccine, okay? People's ratings would have already attached to it, most likely. And you could say when you read it, only give me the ratings of verified people who work for the CDC. You could do that in Firefox. That's what I'm thinking. You could say, I only want the ratings of verified users who work at the CDC. What do they think of this article? You tell Firefox to do that filter, and they all think it's not true information. So you discount it. Or there's a big problem, right, 4 years ago, 5 now, with the Russian disinformation about different things that Trump may or may not have done. Can you trust that? Is it valid information? Well, first of all, you would know whether a verified user made it or not. Maybe they didn't, but maybe they're in another country. Maybe they're not. But if it's a lie, they're going to go to jail eventually with a lawsuit, okay, by the laws of the land. But also, when you read that article, you have access to everybody's ratings about that article and about that writer and about the company they work for. Okay? You have access to those ratings. You might not know their name, but you have access to the ratings. And you could say, I only want the ratings of people who themselves have a good reputation for accuracy. Because a person kind of gets an overall rating based on all their works. So you, as a user, as a information consumer, can get these opinions that people have posted, verified but anonymously, about that information. It becomes a big network of information. I think I'm out of time, but let's go with the question.
I have a very counterintuitive example of what you just said.
Okay.
So you find somebody that does not believe in scientific things, like there's young and there's a whole bunch of information out there about these microchips and vaccines, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And, I see some influencers who, follow that line of belief, and I choose to trust their, information. Like, how do you give, a certain rating value to that information?
Well, anyone can rate information.
Yeah, exactly. So,
But you don't have to see everybody's ratings if you don't want to.
okay.
But
you can selectively see ratings of people that you are interested in.
Yeah. So let me try to paraphrase that one. I think your question's going to how do you kind of convince someone of the right information, essentially, when they read it? It's kind of going to that direction.
Yeah.
But you can't force them. We don't do that here. You don't force people. But you, if you want to, can say, only give me ratings of people who are willing to say they have a medical doctor's degree about that. You can say that. Because there will be, if it's a popular article, there might be hundreds of thousands of ratings. And some of them are anonymous, some of them aren't. But some of them could be anonymous, but the person has a medical degree. And you could say, oh, yeah, I only want to listen to the medical experts on this one. And you could do that in Firefox. Or I only want to listen, like Sununu, right? Let's say Sununu is thinking about a new law about vehicles, like I was talking with Kaylin the other day about should we mandate inspections in New Hampshire. Let's say Sununu's thinking about this. Well, Sununu might only want to listen to ratings or read ratings from people who live in New Hampshire. He could do that. It's just a filter on that piece of information. He wouldn't know their names, couldn't get back to those people with any sort of punishment, but he now knows what his constituents think in New Hampshire, or any constituents. I think this would be a great thing. This is where some of my politics come in. I think this would be a great thing for elected leaders to know what their constituents think, to get also an idea. This doesn't have to be an article. It could be an idea. I have a good idea about reforming the welfare system. And here's the idea. Put it on Stack Exchange. I don't know. Quora. I don't know where you put it. But here's the idea of a better way to do the welfare system in America. And people could say, no. We've looked at that. Look at that 1984 paper. Murray went through all that. They could say all kinds of things. But they're accurate about it. They're respectful and so forth. And the ratings would all say, well, no one thinks that. At least these kind of people don't think that. Or some people might really like your idea and so forth. It would be, I think it would be a great way to help leaders and others understand what ideas are out there and what their opinions are. We're kind of out of time, huh? A couple of minutes, I guess, for one more. Or do we have? We've been ignoring online for sure.
My question is that let's say I'm working on a project and I post some information, but I store some information which is being used by others. But let's say that information is like protected. Maybe I'm working for a company and let's say it can be potentially patented or something. Then is there an additional layer of it's like what is being published to others can it be like blocked? And basically, if it is like information which can be potentially protected, then can it be like not shown to the public immediately? What is our
Yes. Now let me make sure I understand this. So some information isn't just an easy my own information bank account. It might be part of my company's account. Maybe I don't want anyone to see it except for inside my company. Yeah. Well, yeah, I could see that. Maybe Lockheed has their own information bank for their own information. That's fine. Now they wouldn't maybe reconcile the ledger with other companies. Maybe they might. Remember, the information's not shared. It's just a hash under there. So, yeah, I can envision things like that. I think there's an advantage when it's immutable and it's authenticated and so forth. It would be more trustworthy for the company and for you and for the organization you're in. Yeah.
When I'm, let's say, I did not have an idea, but I don't have resources to verify. Let's say I have come up with some idea, and let's say some other people who have the resources can verify it, can design and verify it. So, with this kind of a cycle system, can a project be developed from scratch to just using this information? I post small idea and then others help and it becomes without requiring formal
Okay, let me restate that and make sure I got it. Does the information bank have to be a formal organization that you might pay for, or can it just be homegrown open source software? Yeah, I think that would be great. I think that would be great. I don't know how much effort it will be to maintain the information bank, but I would like to see this kind of thing. I would like to see that you simply like this type of information bank. It's open source. It's easy to do. It's not government still, but you choose that one, and it's a nonprofit, or it's even just like KDE or some other project. It's just out there, and you can be a part or not. If this gets adopted, there will need to be some laws about it. Like, in order to trust that information, it has to reconcile. It has to have a certain security level of ledger, most likely, and reconcile with other banks so often, that kind of thing. But beyond that, maybe it could just be no cost open source project. That'd be nice. Yeah. I am. The question is, am I programming this up or making it, or where's it going? I wish I had those resources. Wish I could do it. I am not doing that. This is a paper that I got published in that's coming out in March, and it's notional at this point. And if anyone would like to help, I need a lot of help if I was going to implement it. So it's nowhere at the moment. It's just an idea. Yeah.
One question. Yeah. Thank you, Ben.
Okay. Thank you.